To record. Awesome. Thank you. And it will be posted to our 33rd District PTA YouTube channel in a week or so. So if you'd like to review it again, or direct anyone that you know within your unit that needs to take a look at it, please do so. I'd like to ask everyone to mute yourselves during the presentation. And I'd like to also mention that I sent the handouts out. There's 6 handouts, 6 files that were emailed to all the registered attendees as of yesterday at about 2 p.m. That's where we cut off the list. But what I will do, if you registered afterward, I'm going to go back and look at the final list and resend the handouts to all of those folks that registered after that point and after the time I sent out the initial handouts. If you have a question, or if you have questions, please type them into the chat. Marcy will be monitoring the chat, and she will, we will stop about halfway, and then at the end of the presentation for any questions. But I'd like for you to please submit only general questions and not those that are related to a specific unit or council issue or problem. If you have that kind of a question, please email me directly, and you can see on our first screen that my email is parliamentarian@33rdpta.org. What are bylaws? Bylaws are specific rules by which the PTA is governed, and they supersede any general rule of parliamentary law with which they may be in conflict. Bylaws are designed to help the group function in an orderly manner. Articles of organization. Your bylaws are your articles of organization. They may not be suspended even by unanimous vote. Any action contrary to the PTA's bylaws is null and void and should be so stated when discovered. Your bank may ask for your articles when opening an account, and you would supply them with your bylaws if they do request that. The bylaws of the Unit Council, District PTA, and California State PTA and National PTA all state that Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, latest edition, shall be the parliamentary authority. If you need help in interpreting Robert's rules or your bylaws, contact me or your council parliamentarian. You can purchase a copy of Robert's Rules from the district office, or you can purchase it online on Amazon or at a bookstore. We also have the abridged version, which is shorter and somewhat easier to understand. What are standing rules? Standing rules outline the procedures of the organization that are not included in the bylaws, and they must not restate or conflict with the bylaws. For those of us that have been around a while, you will notice that many items that used to be listed in the bylaws have been now moved to the standing rules. A good example of the difference between bylaws and standing rules is bylaws state the number of vice presidents on the board, but the standing rules state the responsibilities and the designated order of the vice presidents. Standing rules are the details of monthly PTA work that may be changed from administration to administration or from meeting to meeting. They require a 2/3 majority vote without notice and a majority vote with the 30 days notice to adopt or amend by the association. Standing rules may be amended between bylaws updates as long as the information change does not impact the bylaws. If so, a bylaws update is required. You should send any standing rules updates once approved through channels to your council and 33rd District for our files between bylaws updates. Standing rules must accompany updated bylaws when submitted for approval. Bylaws, what are they? Very simply, your bylaws are your PTA's legally binding documents. They can only be changed by going through the 4-step update process, and they cannot ever be suspended. Who gets a copy? The president, secretary, parliamentarian, as well as all executive board members must receive a copy of your current bylaws. You can provide them with the paper copies or with the PDF electronically. Additionally, any member, upon request, is entitled to receive a copy. When are they updated? Bylaws must be reviewed annually by the Bylaws Committee and updated at least every 5 years, even if there are no amendments to the most current version. The Bylaws Summary Sheet is a great tool to provide to your executive board. That is one of the handouts I did send out to you yesterday, and I sent you a fillable version. It contains all of your most important information on one page. You could make it a training exercise to provide your executive board with the full set of bylaws, along with the blank summary sheet, asking them to complete it. They will have to go through the bylaws themselves to do so and may learn a thing or two. The PTA bylaws articles. Your bylaws are organized in articles. In Article 1, well, the cover page, let's start with that. That contains your legal name, your state ID number, and your national ID number. It also states when your bylaws were organized, what day. Article 1 contains the legal name of your PTA, and which must appear on all legal documents such as tax filings, minutes, or any communication to state PTA. Article 2 states the purposes of the organization. Your executive board should review its PTA's goals to ensure that they align with the purposes of PTA. Article 3 outlines the basic policies of PTA, including non-commercial, non-sectarian, and non-partisan policies. Article 4 details your per capita dues, how much goes where, remittance deadlines, and other membership items. Article 5, and this is a very important article, lists your required officers, nominating committee requirements, and also who's on the, how many members are on your nominating committee and alternates, term restrictions, date of election, how to fill a vacancy in office, and notice requirements to officers and members. Article 6 states officers and chairs must follow duties described in the toolkit. This article also covers how to legally remove a non-attending officer or chair or one whose conduct is considered injurious to the organization. Article 7, association meetings, includes everything to know about an association or general meeting, the annual or election meeting month, and required meeting quorums. Article 8, your executive board, discusses the executive board, who is included and what the board does, how the board approves payments, financial oversight, including audits, audit review committees, and reviews by non-check signers. Article 9 covers council PTA membership. It states to which council you belong, if in council, and who represents a PTA at council meetings. Out of council PTAs would strike this article, or when using e-Bylaws would automatically strike this article if you are an out of council unit. Continuing, Article 10 details the charter procedure for all local PTAs. Article 11 explains PTA's relationship with national PTA and California state PTA. Article 12 contains the articles of organization. Article 13 states the start and end of your fiscal year and lists all of your agency identification numbers as assigned to your PTA. Article 14 states the parliamentary authority that is Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. Parliamentary authority empowers PTAs in achieving proper meeting procedures and respecting every member's opinion. Article 15 outlines the bylaw amendment procedure, including review by the California State Parliamentarian. And lastly, you have your signature page and then the standing rules. I provided a handout that's titled PTA Bylaws Are Essential, and that handout goes into more detail in terms of what is contained in all of your articles. So I would encourage you to keep that as a reference and refer to it whenever you need to. Here's some new things to consider. Quorums. The standing committee chairs do not add to the calculation of your executive board or your association meeting quorums if there are less than 10, and very few of our units have 10 or more standing committees. If your unit has had difficulty meeting quorum, you can consider making some of the vice presidents standing committee chairs. They would still be part of your executive board and still have full voting rights, but their number would not impact the calculation of your quorum. The minimum quorum for executive board meetings is 5, and for associations meetings is 11. April elections. This is new. The state PTA parliamentarian will not approve bylaws where the election meeting occurs in the second half of April, even if it was previously approved by a previous state parliamentarian. So I have run into difficulty with this in at least one bylaw submission where we had to change the election annual meeting month or date, in other words, the week and the day of the week. So please look at that, even if you don't think you need to amend that and make a change. If your annual meeting, if your election meeting happens to fall in the 3rd or 4th week of April, any day, that needs to be changed in your next update. Standing committee chairs. The state PTA parliamentarian will not approve bylaws where the term chairman is used. The term chair or chairperson is acceptable. This needs to be changed as you're doing your e-bylaws or if you're doing the fillable PDF. If you have previously used chairman, you have to change that term. You may have your executive board and association meetings on the same day if the executive board meets after any association meeting during that month. If you choose to do that, e-bylaws will automatically throw in a sentence in the standing rules that says just that any executive board meetings occurring during the same month as an association meetings must happen after the association meeting. Quorum calculations. The association meeting quorum is calculated by taking the number of elected and appointed officers plus 4 or 11, whichever is greater. So if you have a total of 9 elected or appointed officers, you would have to add 4, making it 13, and that would be your quorum for your association meeting. Executive board quorums is equal to the majority of the number of elected and appointed officers plus the principal plus the teacher representative, or 5, whichever is greater. For example, if you have 10 officers, the calculation would be 10 plus 1 for your principal plus your teacher rep, which is 11. And then you would calculate the majority of 12, And so then you would take the majority of 12, which would be 7. So it'd be half of 12, which is 6, but add 1 to make it a majority. of 7. Special rule for standing committee chairs, and I went over this in the last slide. If you have 10 or more standing committee chairs who are not members of your board, you must divide the number by 2 and then add it to both quorums, both the association meeting quorum and the executive board quorum. E-Bylaws will calculate this and take into consideration, it'll count how many standing committees you've listed under your standing rules, and it'll calculate your association meeting quorum and executive board quorum to include that. The bylaws review process. I've included a handout, which also was sent out in the summer mailing to your presidents, which is titled PTA Bylaws Review 4 Key Steps. And let's go over those steps. Step 1 is the president. Well, this is going to look like more than 4 key steps, and I haven't consolidated it into the 4, but these are the steps. The president appoints a bylaws committee, which is chaired by the parliamentarian. The committee then reviews the bylaws to see if any changes are necessary, and then completes a set of the most current edition of bylaws for local PTAs or PTSAs. Using e-bylaws is preferred, and using the e-bylaws worksheet is very helpful. The committee prepares and presents to the executive board the recommendations that no changes be made or list of proposed amendments. This step is very important. You can't bypass this step. The executive board needs to review any amendments and needs to approve those amendments before you can take the next step. The parliamentarian completes the 33rd District PTA Bylaws submittal form or cover sheet, listing all of the proposed amendments on page 2. I sent you, one of the handouts is our submittal form for 33rd District, and it is a fillable PDF. You'll mail that along with the bylaws to your council parliamentarian if in council, or to your district mentor if out of council. After the approved bylaws are signed by the state parliamentarian and returned to your unit through councils, an association meeting is scheduled to adopt the amendments to the bylaws. Members must be notified of the meeting at least 30 days in advance with a list of the proposed amendments. Can you please mute your, thank you. A 2/3 vote of the association membership is required to adopt the amendments. There is no exception to that. After adoption of the bylaws, the president and secretary would then sign and date the signature page. The parliamentarian then scans the signature page and emails a readable copy to your council parliamentarian if out of council, or to your district mentor, or directly to me, the district parliamentarian, if you are out of council, to update their files into our files. Okay, let's take a break and take some questions.
I do have one question that was posted in the chat. It says, if you have a small executive board, 5 members for quorum could be difficult. Do you have any suggestions for this?
The 5 is the minimum. And that is a California state PTA rule. So I would encourage you to get all of your members to attend your meetings. If the executive board simply cannot meet a quorum, all items of business will have to go to your association.
I see another hand up. Go ahead with your question.
If you have a question, please type it into the chat.
I'd rather do it that way. Okay.
Oh, okay, I'll do that.
Okay, so here's another question. When does the review of the bylaws need to take place each year? Is there a specific time, date that it needs to be done?
There is no specific time, but it's a good idea to do it as early in the year as possible. Your bylaws committee would have to be appointed by the president during an association meeting. So that can be one of the items of business during your first association meeting, whether it's in August, September, October.
I've been told that if the bylaws have not been updated through e-bylaws, they need to be updated every 3 years. Is this true?
The bylaws, your bylaws have to be updated every 5 years. It used to be 3 years, but that changed, I think, 2 years ago. So even if you don't have any changes, you know, even everything is going to stay the same in terms of the makeup of your officers, your meeting days, your months, you still have to do an update every 5 years so that you have the most current version of the bylaws in place.
Is there a particular number of people that need to be on the bylaws committee?
A committee can be as few as 2 people. So there is no particular number. It's whoever is interested in doing the work would be a good member for that committee.
Is there an updated 33rd District bylaws cover sheet if the bylaws are being updated?
The cover sheet has been updated and there are no changes. The cover sheet does state that you need, we prefer to have everything done electronically, and it was updated last year.
You mentioned we would have a mentor. How do we find out who that person is and how to contact them, or is that Vera?
If you are an out of council unit, you do have a leadership mentor. In council units, in council units, your mentor is your council president or your council officer. If you're a unit parliamentarian, your council parliamentarian would be your mentor.
I can address this a little bit too. If you are out of council and not ABC Unified School District, your mentor is me. And if you are ABC Unified School District, your out of council mentor is Anita Abrick.
Thank you.
Our president was told at a council meeting that our bylaws now have to have TK mentioned somewhere since our school has a TK class some years. Is it true? And can I do it on a standing rule since we aren't due for a bylaws submission to California this year?
Okay, if I'm understanding the question, your school is now it used to be, for example, a K through 5, but now it's a TK through 5. That is a change to your bylaws, and it's a change on, that has to happen through a request for a change of status. So your council has to request a change of grade levels that will come to me as the district parliamentarian, and then I will create the paperwork and have our district president sign it. We then send it on to state PTA, who then approves it and goes into the e-bylaws system and changes your grade levels. Once that's done, then you can go in and do a bylaws update, and your new bylaws will have the new grade level on it. There's no need to do a motion or put it into the standing rules separately. It does become an amendment that your bylaws committee would present.
Bylaws committee has to be appointed at an association meeting? That's a question.
Yeah, yes, your bylaws committee is appointed by the president at an association meeting, and then president's appointments are ratified by the association.
It can't be appointed at an EB meeting. That's a no.
I'm sorry?
It says it can't be appointed at an EB meeting.
Yes, they can. Chairman and committee members can be appointed at an EB meeting. You may want to see if there's anybody interested at your association meeting that isn't part of your EB though, or executive board.
And then it says 2 silly questions, but there are no silly questions. So does a new standing committee have to be formed after we create bylaws allowing for it? Can a standing committee chair have a vote on the executive board?
Okay, standing committees are created once they're listed and in your standing rules and approved by your association. The standing committee chair is appointed by the president during an executive board meeting that is in your bylaws. And standing committee chairs are members of your executive board unless that's been specifically crossed out in your bylaws. In most cases, 99% of the cases, that is not crossed out. So I would say check your bylaws under the article for your executive board, which I believe was number 8. And it lists who the members of the executive board are. If you're a member of this executive board, then yes, you do have a vote.
That's all the questions I see for right now, so I think we can.
Okay. Sounds good. Let's move on. All right. We're going to talk about e-bylaws. Okay, so you have been appointed as the bylaws committee chair, and the committee has met and has come up with a list of proposed amendments. The next thing to do is to complete the e-bylaws worksheet for units. I provided that as one of the handouts, and I made it a fillable PDF to make life easier for you. If you don't already have an e-bylaws username or password, you can request them on capta.org at this link, or you can search e-bylaws, and this page will be the first one listed at the top. It only takes a couple of days to get your username and password back. And you can then also access e-bylaws from this page. The state PTA is moving into a more secure information system, and you may have to register as a unit officer in the leaders website tab to access this information in the future. So just be aware of that. You will also see links for more information if you scroll down the same page. I have already provided you with the review procedure handout and the e-bylaws worksheet. The instructions here on the second tab is the more detailed list of information organized by article and is available in both English and Spanish, and is more helpful if you're using the PDF that you've built, the fillable PDF bylaws rather than the e-bylaws. But we would prefer that you use the e-bylaw system in creating your updated bylaws. Once you received your username and password and access to bylaws, this is the first page you'll see. The first thing to do is review the information. As you can see, it lists the unit name, whether or not you're a PTA or a PTSA, if you're in council or out of council, what district you happen to be in, what council you happen to be in, the school address, your organization date, your fiscal year, your grades in school, and your national PTA ID and your California state PTA ID. If you cannot make any changes to this page, by the way. If you see information that is currently incorrect, for example, grades in school, a change of status form must be submitted to state PTA by the district PTA. Ask your council if in council or your district mentor if out of council to submit the request. Once our district president, Julie France, approves it and the state PTA receives it, e-bylaws will be updated to reflect the current and new information. This should be done before updating your bylaws in e-bylaws so that your final version reflects all of the current information. Exit out and wait for the update to happen. If all is correct, you may proceed to the next page. This is page 2, and it contains your Article 5, officers and their election information. You may make any changes that your bylaws committee has agreed on, keeping in mind that this information would change your quorums. When done, click Next. Here's the third screen, Article 7, Association Meetings. Notice that the last meeting of the year must appear after the word "and." The month when the annual election meeting is held must be entered twice, once in the list of meeting months and again in the special annual election meeting month field. Your election must take place before the second half of April. If you choose or currently have an association meeting day in the third or fourth weeks of April, e-Bylaws will accept it, but the state parliamentarian will reject it, even if it was previously approved by a former state parliamentarian. If the election meeting month does not match a month in the list, an error message will also be visible. The e-Bylaws will calculate the minimum quorum and insert it in the quorum field. The unit can increase the quorum, but you cannot decrease it. Again, the minimum association quorum is 11, or the number of officers plus 4. Here is an example of a common error and what appears in e-Bylaws. The executive board meeting must take place at least 14 days from the association meeting. You may have both meetings on the same day, but the executive board meeting must take place after the association meeting. e-Bylaws will add this to the standing rule for executive board meetings, saying that the meeting must take place after any association meetings that month. Continue through the process of reviewing and entering any updates by pressing next, like the duties of vice president, etc. When you have completed the process, click Bylaws, and the program will ask you if you'd like to create the bylaws and whether or not you'd like the instructions pages included. Make your choice, and e-Bylaws will create and download a PDF version of your updated bylaws. Save the file to your computer. Keep in mind that e-Bylaws is just a tool to create a set of updated bylaws. It does not update the bylaws on file with the state until after you go through the next steps and the bylaws are approved by the state parliamentarian. You must complete the process by next presenting the updated bylaws and amendments to your executive board for approval. Once approved, your next step is to complete the district submission form listing all amendments on page 2. Do not add the ability to have teleconference meetings to the amendments. This was approved by state PTA for all units, councils, and districts. Email the completed submission form along with the updated bylaws to your council if in council, or to your district mentor if you're out of council. If all is in order, you should receive your approved bylaws within about 3 weeks, and you can continue the process. Do you only need to update your standing rules? Standing rules may be updated without a bylaws change if the desired change or amendment does not impact your bylaws. For example, changing a meeting day. Keeping in mind there must be 14 days between executive board and association meetings. Changes and amendments to standing rules require a 2/3 vote without notice or a majority vote with 30-day advance notice. You may retype, write in, or use e-Bylaws to make the change. If using e-Bylaws, you cannot use the bylaws generated unless they are sent through channels and approved by the state PTA parliamentarian and then approved by your association with 30 days notice. Only state PTA approved bylaws are considered legal. Once approved, send your new standing rules to your council or to 33rd District PTA if out of council for our files. Okay. Questions?
I see a few questions, but I think you might have answered this one. It says,
okay.
I or we just update or add standing rules. Does it have to be submitted to district and state?
Yes, I just answered that question. If you updated your standing rules and it did not impact your bylaws, changing the quorum or the number of vice presidents or something like that, then once they're approved by your association, send a copy to your council if in council, or to me and your district mentor if out of council.
Follow up to TK question. Is there a form to submit, or would an email suffice? If they're changing from, I guess, K through 5 to TK through 5.
The TK through 5, an email will suffice to, if you can email your council or email your district mentor if you are out of council. We will fill out the form because the form requires Julie Francis, our district president's signature.
If we need to upgrade to have TK added as a grade, are we able to update our bylaws, or do we have to wait for the state to update the TK aspect?
If your unit has become a TK school, you can follow the process I just talked about. You can email a request to change the grades to your council parliamentarian, or if out of council, to your district mentor or to me, and we will create the form that we'll send to the California State PTA. Once they get the form and approve it, they will update the e-bylaw system and change that information in e-bylaws as well as all the records they have.
And then you can update your bylaws after that change is made, correct?
Then you would update your bylaws and any other amendments, yes.
Okay, just to confirm, I heard you say we do not need to add the ability to do video conference meetings to our bylaws.
That information is already in the revised new bylaws. So when you update your bylaws, that'll appear in your bylaws. You do not have to add it as an amendment because it was previously approved at a convention for all units, councils, and districts within the California State PTA. So it's not an amendment that needs to be approved. It has been already approved for everybody.
Okay, why must the EB meeting follow the general meeting? I thought the EB meets before the general to discuss any questions and then make their suggestions based on their meeting discussions before any general meeting votes take place.
That is correct. The EB meeting has to happen at least 14 days before your association or general meeting. But if you have your EB meeting on the same day as your association meeting, it should happen on this, if it's on the same day after the association meeting. So you will have that 14 days, at least 14 days between meetings. In that case, it'll be a month between meetings.
Will you let us know when the e-bylaws is ready to proceed with the grade level updates?
Yes, I will. Once it gets entered in, approved and entered into the system, I will let you and your council know that it's ready, that it's been done, and you can proceed with the rest of your amendments or to generate a new set of bylaws.
Is there a specific area about budgets in the bylaws?
The only area regarding budgets is under the association meetings and executive board meetings articles, which states that the budget must be approved by the association. And it's the budget and programs, by the way. Don't forget that. A lot of times that piece is not considered.
What should we do if there's an association meeting already scheduled for early next week, but is only 13 days after an EB meeting? Is there a way to agree that this one meeting is okay, since I just found out about the rules for the meetings?
You know, in this specific case, I would say go ahead with it, but your unit needs to take a look at when your meetings are scheduled and going forward to make sure that you do have that 14 days span, at least 14 days between meetings.
How much in percent could the membership be raised, and how often? I think you're talking about membership dues. Is that, Hilda, is that what you're talking about, membership dues?
Okay.
Yes.
Membership dues are listed in your bylaws, and the dues amount, as well as the district, your council, your district, your state and national portions. Any changes to your your unit dues would be decided upon by your unit association. The other changes have to be adopted and approved within the other voting bodies. So if there's a change in your council portion, that would be voted upon by your council voting body. There's no formula or percentage amount. The council portions are basically all different for all of our units, but your district, your state, and your national portions stay the same unless the district, California State, or national PTA make a change.
Will the e-bylaws system show us when the last time the bylaws were updated? Can we wait 5 years from that date?
No, that information does not appear in e-bylaws. Where you can get that information is in your most current bylaws, the bylaws that you're working on now. The signature page shows the date that the state parliamentarian approved it. And you would go 5 years from that date, the date of the approval by this California State PTA parliamentarian. Also, your councils receive a list that I provide every month that has all the unit information, the date they were organized, their state ID, their national ID, when the bylaws were last approved, and also the other government agency numbers. So you can check with your council, but the easiest thing to do is to look at your bylaws. And it's on the signature page.
And if you don't have a copy of your bylaws, I know there are some units that don't have copies. Please contact your council president and we will figure out how to get those to you.
Yes, your council president should have copies, and your council parliamentarian should have copies of all of your bylaws. If they don't, then they will come to me. I have the district parliamentarian. We have copies of everyone's bylaws.
What is the procedure if we want to change the time for an association meeting? Same date, but move from evening meeting to an AM meeting.
The time of the meeting is not in your bylaws. You can change that, but you need to, for association meetings, you need to give a 10-day notice. If your meetings have been in the evenings at 7 p.m. and you want to change them to the mornings or vice versa, the first time you do so, you need to give notice to your membership, to your association, of that change, and it has to be a 10-day notice.
Those are all the questions I see. So if you have any more, pop them into the chat real quick.
Sorry, can I ask the question verbally?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, so as I'm sure you're aware, I understand what you're saying about the state PTA parliamentarian moving the elections that have to be in the first 2 weeks of April. However, I was just wondering if 33rd could, on our behalf, talk to them about how difficult that is and maybe put in an argument to change that back, because, for example, depending on when Easter falls, that's going to impact our spring break. And so for my students, or for our students' school in ABC, the second week is spring break, and the week before, the students don't have class on Friday. So, and that's always the case for elementary. They get the Friday before as well as the week after. And so depending on when Easter falls on that particular year, having a meeting in the first 2 weeks of April is going to be near impossible, let alone to get a quorum for election.
I've tried. This came up, I sent in an updated bylaws for one of our units. It wasn't an ABC unit. And I argued that this was previously approved by a previous state parliamentarian. I also argued that it doesn't say that in the toolkit, but they came back with that information is now on the CAPTA website. So, and they said absolutely no. What I would recommend is change the month, maybe change it to March. And if that might help, but they will not budge on this, the current state parliamentarian. This might change. I've got to tell you that every state parliamentarian seems to have, seems to pick an issue that they want to press upon everyone. So you can wait until next year and not update your bylaws and just stay where you're at with the third or fourth meeting in April. But if you submit a bylaws update for any other reason and not list that, they will notice and they will not approve your bylaws. I'm sorry.
Question, how do I change my high school to a PTSA from a PTA? What is the process?
Okay, if your high school PTA is incorporated, it's more difficult. You would need to change your articles of incorporation to change the name. If you're not incorporated, it's easy peasy. It would be just a change of status, just like a grade change. You would ask your council parliamentarian or your district mentor to make the change. It'll come to me. I will create the change of status and ask Julie France, our president, to sign it and send it up to state PTA. They will then change the record on e-Bylaws as well as change all their other records so that it'll reflect as a PTSA. The only other thing I would like to mention is that if you go from a PTA to a PTSA, the only requirement is that at least one of your executive board members is a student. But you can be a PTA and have student officers on your board as well. But there is a requirement to be a PTSA that you have to have at least one student on your board.
Another question, if you are past the 5 years, can you still wait to update the bylaws?
I would update them as soon as possible if you're past the 5 years. You would still use your bylaws even if they're 7, 8 years old. They would still be considered your current bylaws even though the update is past due.
One thing I would caution is about bylaws is your dues. You can't raise the dues without a bylaws change, without updating your bylaws. They're specifically outlined in your bylaws. So if your bylaws say that you're supposed to be charging $8 for membership, but you're charging 10, technically, well, not even technically, you can't do that. So
you can't do that.
So that would, check what your bylaws say for what your dues are supposed to be and what you're supposed to be charging for membership.
Yeah, if you are charging more for membership than what is listed in your bylaws, if anybody complains, you would have to refund everybody that paid the higher amount, the difference.
Any other questions? I don't see any more, Vera.
Okay. Resources, here are the resources. This is also listed on the handout, the PowerPoint handout I sent out yesterday. And thank you for attending. If you have any other questions that you may think of after this workshop or just sitting around thinking about your bylaws, you can always email me and I'll answer your question or I'll direct you to somebody who can answer the question for you. Okay, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and taking time out of your busy schedules to do this. We really appreciate it. And we have recorded this workshop. It will be posted on our 33rd District PTA YouTube channel within a week or so, hopefully. So look for that. And lastly, Marcy, did you want to talk about further trainings we might have coming up?
Yes.